Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and Mary Rodwell is back. And Mary, I wanted to talk to you about a phenomena that I picked up on recently. And that is, I mean, it is not new, the subject. It appears it comes in waves. But right now, there is a lot of talk of aliens coming in and revealing themselves, especially around this three-eye atlas where some scientists say it appears it is intelligently steered. It has no tail, it is not a comet, but it is emitting light from the front as if it has headlights. So and I saw other video channels talking about the Lyran fleet is here, yada, 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 and on it goes. Did you pick up on that as well?
I think what you're mentioning is really very vital at the moment because there's so much hype around this. And we've been always told by Carol Rosen, who worked with Werner von Braun, that Werner von Braun said the last card they're going to play to scare people would be an alien invasion.
Mm.
And I think that what they're trying to do is scare the living pants off everybody about this and to say that we've all got to be scared and what have you. Whereas my sources, including my own tapping in, is that this has actually been something that's been waiting for a particular time to manifest. And it's part of this activation and awakening of humanity to the reality that we're not alone. And I think this is this is we're more than ready for that now. And I feel it's going to be part of this whole shift in human consciousness. This is part of what this is. So I feel very positive about all of what's happening right now in that sense.
Hmm.
That's my own feeling. And
Yeah.
there's been others that have said they said different species are part of that contingent, and I suspect that may be very well the case. But I mean, I don't know any more than anyone else does, other than what we're intuitively feeling.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, we have been conditioned to accept the fact that we are not alone via movie, TV series. I mean, there has been a great push in pop culture, to bring extraterrestrials to the forefront. And I will leave it open if they are interdimensionals or if they are ETs, and I don't really care. Um, but of course, for instance, this one channel that was talking about the Lyran fleet
Mm.
that is here, and she always has that in her headline: a three-eye atlas and Lyran fleet. I forgot about the channel's name. It's something with quantum. Of course, it has to be quantum. And uh, but what comes immediately with it is a savior program. You
Mm.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
As if, yeah, they are all, because now it appears Three-Eye Atlas has multiple comets
Yeah.
accompanying the big one. And so that is supposedly the fleet. And but I really wonder, why would any alien race come and save us from ourselves? That doesn't make sense to me.
I don't think that's so much what it is, because I think already what I understand of those that I've worked with, many of them are souls that have connected to other star systems that have incarnated as part of shifting the consciousness of the planet, including the children, as I, write about in The New Human. And this has been happening for a number of generations. They've been called indigos, crystal children, all these different names, but they have the awareness of connecting to other star systems, whether it's the Pleiades, Andromeda, Arcturus, Orion, or other dimensions. And so for me, that's been the advance of assisting this planet to evolve. I think this is going to be more of a support network that's going to assist in the whatever this shift is that's going to happen. I have no idea ultimately how it'll unfold. And when I've tried to sort of tune in to my own kind of awareness, it's sort of as you're going to have to wait and see, Mary, kind of feeling. We're not going to tell you but the feeling is it is massive in the sense of how that shift is going to happen, and whether or not it's just part of triggering consciousness on those that are still asleep, because they need to see something physical, they need to see something very tangible for the ones that are still unsure about this reality or not knowing about this reality. There has to be something very physical, I think, for certain people. I've often said, if a UFO, there's 10% of the planet, that if a UFO landed on their front lawn, they'd call it a fire engine because they can't cope with the fact that that's actually a craft from somewhere else. And I'm not going into the fact that some of those in visiting us are interdimensionals, extra dimensionals, transdimensionals, and all the other intelligences. I'm talking now about the very physical, the ones that are in physical form. We know many of them are already walking amongst us, and we wouldn't know, even if we might sense that they're a bit different, but generally there's a lot of them that are literally walking amongst us. So I think there's different programs. That's how I understand it, Judith.
Mm.
And for every different perception or individual soul and their journey, they will have the experience that is the most useful for them in terms of waking them up or activating them and advancing their consciousness. So there's different levels. I think that's how I see it anyway. For some of us, that's unnecessary because we already know they're here. We already are communicating with them. Many of
Mm.
those I'm working with right now are amaze me in their awareness. Many of them have been communicating with different intelligences quite comfortably in their own world without telling family, or if they try and tell them, the family doesn't understand. Their biggest issue is the isolation that causes because they can't share their understanding of themselves and their time on the craft, what they're learning on the craft, what their role is, what their heritage is, and what they've come to do to help the planet. Many of them don't talk about it and haven't ever talked about it, but are starting now to share more and more about this. And I believe disclosure literally will happen from the ground up. That's my understanding. It's not going to be through the governments, because the governments, I think, have been told more than a little about, quite honestly, you can't keep this quiet any longer. You've got to start telling the public and getting this out in mainstream. And they're still doing it at their own pace, and they're still doing drip feeding. So I don't think it's going to happen through them. I think it's going to happen through a groundswell of individuals and some very tangible sightings that give people the chance to actually come to terms with it as a reality. Don't know if I'm right, but that's just my thoughts.
Mm. Of course, with this, yes, yeah, the day before yesterday, it became public that Pete Hegseth is calling all the generals and admirals from around the world, and tomorrow they have a meeting at Quantico.
Yeah.
So, and there are several different takes on that. One take is, yeah, well, it is three-eye atlas,
Yeah.
and the scientists have sounded alarm, and the aliens are here. The other take is they are preparing for war, and the entire thing around the hype around Three Eye Atlas is just to distract you that they are planning a full-fledged Third World War.
Yeah. And look, it could be. I
Mm,
mean, I can't dismiss any possibility that that's the distraction because we know they do that all the time. They present a distraction from what's actually going on. And so that could be very much the case. I think unfortunately it's going to be a bit of wait and see because that's going to be the only way we do actually know what's actually going on.
mm. So, what would you prefer in terms of these two
Ah.
possibilities?
Oh, look.
I guess we are both not interested in a full-fledged war.
Well, I think all of that is absolutely pointless anyway, other than it's more of the genocide that's going on around the planet, which I believe is being absolutely deliberate to cut the population down by any means that is possible for what we call the New World Order or whatever. Um, but one of the things that I keep going back to, and I think it's the only thing primarily that gives me that light at the end of the tunnel, is I've always said that all these wonderful souls that have been incarnating over the last 80, 90, 100 years that are coming from all over the cosmos, interdimensionally as well as on physical dimensions, with all these abilities, I can't see they've incarnated for a waste of time because I don't see there would be any point of a high enlightened being saying, well, yeah, I'm going to Earth and I'm going to work really, really hard, but unfortunately, it's not going to make any difference. you know You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like I can't see that logically as being something these enlightened souls would do. And I'm pretty certain if they said to me, Mary, you're going to go to planet Earth and you're really going to work really hard and do your best to, help people wake up and what have you. But sorry, it's not going to really work out. Are you interested? I'd probably say no, give me some other other venture where I know something's going to work. So that's what I keep coming back to, these wonderful souls that are coming, and more they're bringing in their skills, their awareness, especially the youngsters that are fully awake. I believe it's because they know that ultimately they're going to be able to utilize this awareness and that it's going to shift in this planet will shift in the way that we all would like it to. So that's why I still feel very positive ultimately, despite what's ahead of us or what could be ahead of us. I still feel the outcome will be a good one.
Mm. Yeah, another hype that um, kind of happened at the same time was the rapture hype that was supposed to happen on the 23rd or 24th of September. Okay, that date came and went as they usually do. And but what I found very disturbing is that now the same source, the same South African pastor,
Yeah, yeah,
uh, is giving a new date.
right.
And now it is supposed to be the 7th or 8th of October. The explanation for that is that they went from the viewpoint of the Gregorian calendar, and that is not correct. They should have used the Julian character because allegedly that is what during the time of Jesus people used, which also does not make sense because the ancient Jews had a lunar calendar. The
Mm.
Julian calendar is still a solar calendar. And so in that short amount of time, the same group of people, I'm not saying everybody, some woke
Yeah.
up to the fact that, sorry, we were pranked here. But a huge chunk of the same people are already making videos. Yeah, guys, it's still on. It will be beginning of October. Why is it so easy to deceive us?
Because we've been so programmed to
Mm.
believe those that seem confident and sure of themselves. I think this has been part of the whole thing. We're educated, if you can call it education, I call it programmed, to
Mm.
accept some of these that are coming through mainstream. The whole idea is to cut down the critical thinking so that we will accept whatever is being said, particularly if we're very religious, because religion has been to me a program. I'm
Yeah.
hope I don't affect. I'm really sorry if I'm upsetting people here, but my understanding is that all religions, to me, have been used as a way of controlling the populace and getting them to comply and keep in line. That's coming from someone who used to be very religious until I started to question certain things. And you're not allowed to question in religion. You're supposed to accept everything they give you. And it's all about faith, isn't it? Well, if faith it means blind faith, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. I needed to look into some of the things that I was taught to believe in. And I think that that has been the reason we still accept so much from some of these books, whatever book that is that you work your beliefs from. But it's a control mechanism in the way that I personally, and it's my opinion, that they're all control mechanisms. So anything to do with the mystical from that perspective, if it's attached to a religion, then there's a truth always within all religions, but there's also a great deal of added information that we're taught to believe that doesn't necessarily isn't necessarily accurate, but part of the program. So for me, we're programmed from the moment we were born, from being told how to perceive reality, taught how to understand and accept certain things, and we're very easily programmed right up to, I think, 7 years old. We'll take everything on our hard drive as a reality until we start bringing in left brain cognitive analysis and what have you. But up to that point, we're literally a blank slate. And things like religion are very powerful. I think it's the Jesuits that say, give me a child till they're 7, and then you can do what you like with them after that because they're already programmed into their their particular beliefs or whatever. So that's the problem, is letting go of all those old programs and starting again and realizing how much the information that we're given is edited. And that's not just in religion. That's in science, archaeology, anthropology, the whole gamut. So, all of it has been edited to keep us in a certain place of acceptance to what's going on or what we're told to believe. Oh, if it's on television and somebody there you know is confident, you're going to believe it, aren't you? Because that's what we're programmed to do.
Mm. Of course, there are also videos, where Christians say you're repeating the same mistake over and over again. It says clearly in the Bible, the day and time, nobody knows it, not even the angels in heaven, and only the Father knows. So why are you falling for the same nonsense? And yeah, they have a point, definitely. But what it also shows me, this entire, be it the alien savior, be it that
Yeah.
uh, millions of people think in a couple of days we are being raptured. I give my house away. Sell my car. Some emptied their savings account, gave the money away, yeah, and quit their jobs. And unfortunately, not only a handful. So what it shows me is that people are really tired.
Yeah.
It appears that people feel so exhausted they can't wait to get out of here no matter how. You know what I mean?
I do absolutely, and I will say that there's been times where I'm just saying, guys, I'm really had it here. The next UFO that lands, I'll go there wherever you want to take me, Pluto, Neptune, wherever it is, I'm quite happy to go because it's such a crazy, crazy world now. And it's so hard to even survive for a lot of people that they just want out, and particularly star seeds, because many of them have come from very high frequencies where they're saying it's so aggressive down here. People are so cruel to each other. We don't understand why they're like this, and why is everything about materialism, and it doesn't make any sense to them because they come from a frequency where none of this is important. And they're saying, I want to go home. I don't like it here. And I get that so many, many times from starseeds saying, I've always felt like I didn't belong, that this isn't home, that none of this makes sense to me. And struggling. So, I can understand that if they're aware of some of their other existences which didn't have the same difficulties and challenges that this planet has. And let's face it, it's pretty dark at the moment across the planet in terms of what seems to be proposed for us. If it isn't a third world war, it's living almost, well, I would say, as a slave population to a certain elite few, and that's what we're looking at.
Mm. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that um, aliens also are at war with each other. When you look at the Orion Wars, yeah, and there Lyra also played a big role. So it is not that every other star system, everything is hunky-dory. And maybe those star seeds came from somewhere where, there is more balance and more harmony. I cannot rule that out. But in general, I think the way it presents itself, it's very, yeah, warlike, also in other alien societies.
I think certainly there will be and must be other societies, on other worlds where they still haven't reached a high level of awareness and spirituality. But one of the things I go back to in terms of interactions with these beings, and ultimately, they say by their fruits you will know them. When we did the survey of 4,200 people globally, and we asked them 600 questions and it's all in Beyond UFOs. One of the things that came out of that, out of all of them, 85% showed a psycho-spiritual transformation. So whatever those interactions were, they had a really beautiful, positive impact on those that had the experience. So that in itself says that what's an agenda. Again, by their fruits. The fruits are that people have changed in really positive ways after their experiences. There was only a very small percentage that didn't have that. So I think that's telling us something very, very important. And I do believe that there are a number of intelligences that were part of our creation that have been keeping an eye on us and helping us to evolve. And the fact that they've been also preventing nuclear war by visiting various military bases and switching off, the nuclear warheads and whatever is showing they don't want war. So there are, I believe, certainly many those that are beneficial to us and wish us to evolve, and I believe ultimately to become part of the galactic community. And this is all part of us raising our awareness to the point we understand we're all connected and to understand that from a consciousness level. So yes, I'm sure there are still those that haven't reached that level of awareness yet, but I think we're all on that path. of looking to a greater, more higher frequency of spirituality and love,
Mm.
ultimately.
Yeah, there are people that are saying that those, especially nuclear detonations, have a ripple effect even into other dimensions, and
Yeah.
that is the reason why it's almost like, yeah, self-defense.
Yeah. And there's certainly that's a part of it, is that I think that what comes over with many of those that have had interactions, they're taught about looking after the planet, looking at and being careful with all life, no matter what that life is, from an ant to all the different animals and mammals and whatever. And the sense of being aware of everything being connected and that we're a part of each other. So there is, to me, that has been the most important and most powerful part of interactions with them, which tells me there's more of the beneficial, benevolent species out there than there is of those that have got their own self-serving agenda. That's what the survey indicated that we did with all the questions that were asked. And it was how many of them also felt very connected to different star systems. When I'm taking somebody into hypnosis, one of the things I sometimes will find is that I'll say, are you connected to any star systems of any kind other than your Earth life? And many of them will then tell me, yes. And this will not be conscious. This will be coming from their superconscious self. Yes, I'm connected to the Pleiades, or I'm connected to another star system, or I've come from an interdimensional space, and I've come with my skills and awareness to help this planet evolve. And that comes over time and time again.
Okay. When did you do this survey that you mentioned?
Oh, I can send you the PDF of it actually. It was done about 6 years ago.
Hmm.
It's the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation did it. It's now changed to the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. But the PDF is the title is Beyond UFOs. And in it the survey was done with the 600 questions, and it shows things like, in terms of interactions on board craft, that 75% of interactions on board craft were actually their consciousness, not their physical body, went on board craft. So literally only 25% physically went on board craft. The rest went with their conscious self, their astral body, if you like, has gone on to the craft. We've never known that. We always thought that most times the whole, you'd go with your physical body, but that's not the case. In that 4,000, this is what we discovered, that 50%, sorry, um, yeah, 75% was non-physical and 25% was physical. The other thing that was interesting too was 50% of those that had the interactions had healing on board craft, were actually healed of serious illnesses, and right across the board. That's 50% of those. So that they were obviously really important to protect that particular physical vehicle that soul was in, because of what they were coming to do. And I've had so many stories of healing where people said, 1 minute I was, a smoker all my life. I had terrible lungs. And then I had this experience. And when I went to the doctors and was getting a checkup, they said, oh, your lungs are perfect. So what do you mean that your lungs haven't been very good or whatever? There's a gentleman called Preston Dennett, a researcher, experiencer, who's written numerous books of the healing of different individuals on board craft. So these are the things I think that the public doesn't know about, is the outcomes of many of these experiences are really quite profound in many, many cases.
Mm. Did you also have people in that survey that came back and were very sick?
Not that I recall particularly. I do know there have been some that have touched the craft and been unwell after it. I think Travis Walton was one of them. And he's a very famous case where the documentary Fire in the Sky. And he said that actually, because he'd actually touched the craft, he was taken inside and they actually fixed him up. But he had been affected by the radioactivity, I think, of the actual craft. I'm not sure whether or not those in the Rendlesham Forest interaction, whether that also had an effect on some. So there have been cases where if they've gone to the craft because they've been or touched it, that they've actually had some effect from that. What I do want to say, and I think it's really important, is there have been those that have been had very traumatic experiences, and there's a small percentage of about 15% in the survey. But what I need to add there is not all of them have been obviously ET, because we're talking about MyLab, and I'm sure you know about the MyLab. And I found that with many of them, it's because of the MyLab side of the trauma, not necessarily ET, although there might be a mix of both. I can't say for certain because, I don't have a world view of that. I only know from my research. But the ones that have been the most traumatized are those that have had the military abductions or pseudo abductions, where they've been drugged and interrogated for their information of their experiences on board craft.
Mhm. Do you think there is also a faction where my lab and ETs work together so that it becomes even more confusing what's what?
I think that's possible. Only to add to that is something called program life forms. And that's something else where they've used and cloned some of the ETs, like some of the greys or zetas, reptilians, for example. And in interviews that Miles Johnson's done in bases in the UK, people that have gone underground and seen what's going on will recognize these program life forms that look like ETs, but are actually clones or being brought up by the military and programmed to emulate ET experiences. But the interesting thing was the gentleman that saw one of these reptilians said it definitely wasn't, it, he didn't feel it was ET. He felt it would have been one of these clones. So I don't know enough to say one thing or another, but it seems like it's a lot more layered and a lot more complex than sometimes we understand.
Hmm. Yeah, because from everything that I gathered, military abductions might feel very, very much the same as an ET abduction. And I guess for the layman, it can get very confusing to distinguish what exactly was that, what I just experienced.
That's exactly right. They may have ET interactions and also military, and sometimes they can get confused with both of them. One of the books that I wrote the forward for from was Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light by Naira Isley. And a wonderful lady who was in the military was abducted by the military and interrogated, drugged, etc., underground. And it was through body work she discovered what was happening. And she said that the reason the ETs allowed her to experience that was so that she'd write about it. So that the ones that she connected to, which were star beings, she'd said, "Why did you let this all happen?" They said, "Well, you chose to write about it and expose it." So she saw that almost as a soul mission, was to expose all of that. But one of the interesting regressions that I did with a lady was she was actually in an underground base and she was lying on a stretcher. And she said they were showing me a huge picture of a mantis being above me and telling me to be really scared of it, to be really terrorized with it. And so she could see that she was being programmed to be fearful of ETs generally. Now, that's just one experience, and that doesn't say it's all like that, but it certainly gets you to understand the complexity of what we're looking at, and it's definitely not black and white, as we always want to make everything simple, don't we? But it's often a lot more layered and a lot more complex than we realize.
Hmm. Have you ever watched the TV series X-Files?
I think I've seen most of them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I just was reminded of this situation with Scully,
Yeah,
the female FBI agent, and she had an implant in yeah, at the top of the spine,
yeah,
and later on she developed cancer.
yes,
And then she came in contact with a lot of cancer patients who all
mm,
had the same type of implant
yeah.
extracted from them. And I never could really figure out. To me, it felt as if that was a military intervention, but it could have been both.
I think we don't know enough. We're
Mm,
not told what the governments know or these organizations know. So we're only going on what I can only go on people I'm working with or what I'm finding in my research. So it may very well be both. But certainly, I think most of the public don't realize there's an agenda, a dark agenda, where this has been going on for many, many years. And for me, the most traumatized were those that have had some kind of military intervention. That's all I can say from my own experience working with people.
mm. I'm a little bit curious, going back to your survey. Could you give us a few examples, not all 600 questions, but could you give us a few examples? What did you ask the
Oh
participants?
gosh. Without going back to the list, there's so many. One of them was asking if any of them felt connected to different star systems.
Hmm.
And it was amazing how many had an awareness that they were connected to particular other, other off planet um, species and what have you, which was quite interesting. One of the most one that was interesting to me was it wasn't the number that was seeing ETs. What was the most common wasn't the little grey zeta beings, which I thought might be. It was actually humanoid humans that were the ones that most were seen in their experiences, not, as I say, the greys. They came a good second, but they were not the main ones as well. There was oh gosh, you put me on the spot. I wish I could get the list out because I in my presentations I've put down some of the interesting. One of the things that was very significant, I've forgotten what the percentage was now, but it was quite high, is how their whole perspective on life changed after their experiences in terms of eco looking at ecology, being passionate about the planet, not wanting to harm anything, wanting to live a more holistic lifestyle, losing interest in materialistic values, and many of them interested in things like healing, and working with that awareness that they. Because one of the things I noticed, June, is that more than anything with those that are having experiences is that many of them open up more multidimensionally. What I mean by that is their intuitive abilities expanded so that, from what it was like before, so that they would perhaps sense energies, feel presences, see orbs of light, get downloads of information on all sorts of topics, scientific, um, ecological, and or they would start doing strange writing or codes and symbols, or they would start speaking unusual, what we call the star languages and whatever. So these were all things that manifested after their contact that they hadn't done prior to that. And many of them feel in a way that we've discussed is they can't interact with people in the same way anymore because they know because of how they've shifted and changed in their awareness of the planet and who they are. So that's been a big one. But I'll send you the PDF and
Mm-hmm.
you can pick out some and maybe you can list some of them and put it in with your, your podcast and
Mm-hmm.
give you an idea because it's actually very important in the sense it's the only one that's been done that covered the number of people and the number of questions. So
Mm-hmm.
there's been no other survey that's done that. And I think it's really significant that it's been made more available.
Mm-hmm. Can you recall how you picked the participants of this survey? Were they just random people, or did they already show interest in the subject?
What we did was we put out that we were doing a survey.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who had conscious experiences. So this wasn't about hypnosis because many people have concerns about hypnosis. So it was conscious recall of their experiences. And there were people then from all over the globe, all ages, all cultures, all belief systems, academics, right through to, the housewife. And they decided to fill it in. And it took a while because there were 600 questions. So they had to be dedicated to it. But that's what the result was, the surveys that we did, which were quite profound. And it's interesting because nothing like that has ever been done and should have been done, I think, many years ago. You might get 30, 40 participants that would perhaps fill in a questionnaire or whatever. But we're talking about a really in-depth questionnaire that took a lot of time and patience to do. But people volunteered their own experiences. We didn't. We put it out that we had that survey and who would like to participate. We didn't pick them. They picked themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, I also noticed that people on the internet, what you mentioned in the very beginning, a fake alien invasion, many people are expecting this.
Mm.
And wouldn't it be very funny if the fake alien invasion turned out to be real?
Well, I think so. Um, I'm all for shaking things up a little bit on this planet because I think we need a really good shake up. And I think that a lot of people are very lost.
Hmm.
And there's a sense of, this future. What is our future going to be? And I don't, I think there's always going to be a certain number that are going to struggle with it because of their beliefs. I think that's the problem that's going to be because it's going to shake up many people's belief systems if that actually turns out to be true. That's, the reality of it.
Although I remember a couple of years ago, the Catholic Church came out and publicly said that they would consider baptizing aliens into the Catholic faith if aliens wish to do that.
I remember that. And they always, I did a whole chapter on the religious side of this in The New Human. And one of the things was that the Catholic Church, Monsignor Baducci, who's no longer with us, was actually talking about the whole ET phenomena and people saying, oh, were they demons and what have you? And he said, well, demons don't need spaceships
Mhm.
come and visit us. And it is a real phenomena. He had no problem in saying that people who are having experiences, that it was actually very real. There are some religions that just see it as demons. And I've occasionally had the odd email saying, do you realize you're dealing with demons, Mary, or whatever? And I have a little quiet chuckle about that and what have you. I said, well, the demons are doing a lot of healing when they take people on board the craft. So obviously, they're quite like humans or whatever. But the religious side, unfortunately, does complicate things. And I did do talk about a lovely young Indian adult who wrote to me and said, Mary, I'm a star seed. I've always known I'm a star seed. He said, but I live in a country, my countrymen worship about 100 gods. And he said, and I can't tell them that I believe that they're all ETs, that they're not gods at all, because my family and my relatives wouldn't understand. And this is the issue, isn't it? We've still got, how much of the population across the globe still looks on these different entities as gods rather than potentially visitors from other worlds.
Mm. That is really interesting that he mentioned this because my feeling was maybe, and just when you were starting to talk about it, my feeling was maybe the Hindus would have less problems with it because, and I mean, their gods go into the thousands, not only 100. So, and I thought, I guess to some extent, they already know that their gods have been physical beings, just
Yeah.
not from around here. But obviously, that is not the case.
Well, what was very clear to me many, many years ago was the understanding that we, as more primitive individuals over the centuries, were bound to see anyone that had technology and visited this planet and doing amazing things as gods, because I say if we're going back a couple of 100 years with our smartphones and what have you, and showed them people then about a smartphone, they'd think we were magicians or whatever. And this is understandable. It's only in recent years we realize that technology doesn't make you a magician and it doesn't make you a god. It's just technology. And I think that that's been a big issue for some individuals. I've talked to a number of young adults that have had parents that are very much into some kind of very orthodox religion and saying, I love my parents, I'm very connected to them, and I want to please them, but I can't believe what they believe because I know I'm a star seed. And one young man said to me, he's been very close to committing suicide because he couldn't accept that he couldn't accept his parents' belief, but he couldn't live with the contradiction that it wasn't his belief system and it didn't make any sense to him. So it can be really, really traumatic for those that are growing up with very orthodox belief systems where they know and have an innate knowing that that isn't actually the truth, not for them at least.
Hmm. So, in other words, in his family, there was no discussion allowed
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah, and I had the same thing with the 15-year-old whose
Mm,
parents had a very conventional belief system. She said, I can't tell them because it would break their heart. They'd think
mm,
that there's something wrong with me or whatever. So, in other words, isolated and wanting to please the parents, but can't take that step of pretending to take on their belief system because of their own knowing and knowing their own awareness. And goodness knows what effect it's going to have if indeed what's coming is going to clarify the reality. How is that going to affect billions of people that have this other way of understanding their reality?
mm. Yeah, that is very disheartening because, you know, if you have contradicting viewpoints, yeah, okay. I do not expect everybody to jump on the same bandwagon, but at least can we listen to each
Yeah,
other?
yeah. I think that's the problem that we've had in the last few years, haven't we, with so many things that have divided the population, depending on what you choose to believe is the truth of whatever it is. And we know there's many different ways now of looking at everything. And instead of accepting that that's where somebody's at and that's where they choose to focus and accept as their reality, and they have every right to do that, it doesn't have to be imposed on anybody else, just an acceptance that that's where they're at. Um, I mean, it brings to mind something quite funny, really. It's like, when you're bringing up children and they get to the teenage years and they well, my granddaughter's 5 and she tells me already she knows everything. So, you've got the teenagers basically saying, we know it all. Mum and dad don't know anything. They're too old-fashioned and all the rest of it. And it's not till they get into maybe their middle 20s, they suddenly realize that maybe suddenly mum and dad might be a lot wiser than they thought in the process of that. And I think it's like looking at that and saying, this is where somebody chooses to focus and believe at the moment. That's okay, because that's where they are at the moment. And that's okay that they're feeling like that. And gradually allowing that unfolding for their own awareness to happen when it's time. And I
Mm,
think that's where we're going to need to be, is to help and accept that that's a process that we've all had to go through.
mm. Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, that is normal generational friction. Yeah, every young generation thinks they know it better as their parents do. And to a certain degree, that is healthy. Yeah, otherwise, if you are just conserving what is there, you will never progress. But if you go overboard with your progress, then it is time to dial back a little bit and to see that there are definitely, as you said, there are some things um, within your parents' culture that deserves to be preserved.
Yeah. I think it's about accepting people where they're at and
Mm,
knowing that they'll grow as they're meant to. And I think that is respect for everybody. But the one thing I will say is these new children coming in and these new generations are coming in as teachers, and they're actually showing us where we are going to open up and become more of what we are meant to be. And they will be the teachers, not the other way around. We'll be there to make sure that they're comfortable and they eat properly and they sleep properly, but they'll be telling us this is how it works because they're coming in as awake. And this is what will shift the whole dynamic of how we look at our children and our children's children.
mm. Yeah, let's hope that humanity somehow, you know, I don't know, the word wake up has been overused, but
I know.
something needs to happen here.
Yeah.
And and I do see things happening around the world. For instance, when I look at I said that last year to my patrons, I said you will see a lot of unrest protests next year,
Yeah.
simply because of the energies that were coming in. And this year, I have to say, my goodness,
Yeah.
not a week goes by where you do not find mass protests anywhere, be it in Europe, be it in Asia, be it in Africa. It simply doesn't stop. So, and what I found especially interesting when I monitored the protests in Africa, that the younger generation is completely aware of what the IMF did to their countries, what the World Bank is doing, what their roles is, how neocolonialism actually works. That yes, they do have African leaders, but at the end of the day, as a puppet
Yeah.
for foreign interests, and on it goes. And for, I've been to Africa so many times, and let's say like 20 years ago, that awareness was not there.
Yeah.
A few, yes, but I mean that it was really out in the open, that it became mainstream.
Yeah. And I think that what I'm seeing is exactly the same. When I listen to them now, from different African nations, there's a whole different energy to their psyche and their awareness.
Hmm.
And I'm seeing that more and more in every country, that people are literally getting it. and this is why we're getting all these protests, all these riots, because people are saying we can't continue like this, that we have to stand up. So that gives me a great deal of heart because I think that this is what needs to happen. So I'm actually optimistic, even though it's looking pretty rough at the moment. I'm really optimistic that ultimately the shift is happening and it's happening really fast. And we're getting snippets of it to show us that it's happening. And I believe it will, that I believe we will put this planet on track. So let's hope that I'm right.
Yeah, your words in God's ear. So, how do you, Mary, how do you feel about this? Let's say a lot of people have fears that, yeah, they are planning the Third World War and it will come to fruition. Do you still have hope that that might be prevented?
I do hope that it'll be prevented, and whether or not this is why we're seeing what's happening in the skies right now as part of that, as letting us know that they're there and they're observing. And the fact that they've switched off nuclear um, rockets and all the rest of it over different military bases and what have you for a number of years says they're not going to allow us to destroy ourselves. I think they're pretty clear on that. So I do, I'd like to think that we've come to our senses, whether or not that's due to what comes in the next few months from the from space itself, or whether something else goes on. I'd like to think that we will come to our senses and that that won't happen.
Mm. Sometimes I think those people, politicians that are hell-bent to destroy their own countries, especially economically, as it is happening here in Germany, um, and also in other places, because they still refuse to let go of a green ideology that definitely will lead to hunger, death, destruction, and what have you. I sometimes wonder if those people are fully human or if
Well,
they are hosted by some, yeah, let's say evil spirit.
I wouldn't be surprised
Yeah.
whether or not some of them are what they call the shapeshifters that
Hmm.
are at the top of the tree there, or whether or not they're overshadowed by these intelligences that basically control them. And I think it could be both. It could be some of them are the ones that they call the shapeshifters that are not fully human, but partly reptilian or whatever. But there may be also humans that are influenced or possessed by these intelligences because they don't seem to have any humanity at all. There is no care for their fellow man. That's that's not human, not in my book anyway. So and we know people can be possessed. We know people can be taken over by various interdimensionals and what have you. And we know that some people encourage that to happen through different rituals and all the rest of it. And you've
Mm,
got to be naive not to accept that those kind of things can happen. And you only need to look at the way they behave to others and how they really don't care who gets killed or how many in whatever country, the genocide that's going on all the time in different countries and whatever. That's
mm.
not human. That's not human in the way I see humanity. So I've got no doubts that there are those in privileged places that can actually orchestrate this kind of inhumanity that is going on.
Yeah, and on top of that, we have the fact that um, we have in, you know, important positions. It turns out that we have a lot of psychopaths in there. And one trait, one hallmark of psychopathy is the lack of compassion. And that is actually what we are seeing. So it might be even double pronged. You might have just the pure psychopath because they love power in general. And then you might have those that are hosted by demons, evil spirits, whatever, or you might have a combination of both.
I absolutely agree. And I think certain people are picked that have the psychopathic kind of nature, and they encourage them to be in positions of power because that's exactly what they want. And they probably seek them out, those that have those kind of traits. I mean, I don't know, but I assume that would be something they would do, is because they want people that will feel the same way as they do about humanity and their lack of empathy. So all of that, I suspect, is part of who's controlling the main the main way we live. Our life and the cultures are all controlled by these elite few.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Mary, for coming on this morning, yeah, for you evening. Tell people where they can find your work.
Well, you can Google me and find that I'm on my website, is or you can find me on Facebook. You can message me from Facebook or Telegram as well. So they're the main ones, but I'm easy to find and I'm easy to connect with. So just look me up.
Hmm. Okay. So, yeah, guys, that was it. Night flight for today with Mary Rodwell, and we see you on the next one.